thank you very much for joining us for this European Media Briefing. I appreciate you coming. I know it's been a long couple of days, a lot of stuff going on, but we're nearly at the end, so most of you, I think, are familiar with Rafael Schvartzman, our Regional Vice President for Europe. He's going to be giving a short presentation, and then, of course, we will take any and all of your questions. So, I think we can begin. I think some people are still coming in the back. I'll just give it another few seconds. Yeah. Okay, so, Rafael, please.
All right, well, thank you for coming. You know, a very long AGM, I guess, but good to have you all here. Some familiar faces and maybe some new ones. Today, I want to talk about competitiveness of Europe, and in particular, how to strengthen the competitiveness of the European aviation. While traffic growth is strong, as you know, other regions are stronger, and it is clear from actually the 20-year growth forecast that Europe's relatively decline is set to continue. More worryingly, current regulatory trends look set to accelerate the decline and not reverse it. If competitiveness is slipping, how can Europe regain it? There are three key areas which I call the three C's: cost, capacity, and consumer. It is vital the next generation of European politicians being elected this year tackle these three issues in collaboration with the industry. Let's start with cost. Europe is getting more expensive to do business. Regulators have the power to affect three of the most important cost elements of aviation: charges, taxes, and environmental levies. Air navigation service providers, the cost of air navigation service providers have risen steeply. We have 1.5 billion euros in the last 2 years. If these increases were somewhat justified by improved performance, that might be actually acceptable. But we know that this summer the days are likely to be worse than in 2019. Perhaps the single European sky would have been the opportunity actually to reboot performance. But at the beginning of 2024, we saw the collapse of our hopes for an ambitious single European sky. The second cost item is rising taxes. The Germans, the British, the Dutch, the Danes, the Hungarians have all launched increase in taxes. We believe aviation taxes are self-defeating because they either reduce connectivity or spending power in the economy by more than the actual value of any short-term cash grab. And environmentally, they make almost no difference to emissions. The second C is capacity. Europe cannot continue to expand its connectivity to the rest of the world if it doesn't have the room. There are three key issues to focus on here: investment in infrastructure, following the balanced approach to noise management, following global standards on airport slot regulation. Firstly, investment in infrastructure. Even if new runways are politically impossible, there is much that can be done to improve the capacity of existing infrastructure. New stands at terminal, better use of digitalization to improve passenger flows through the airport, and new scanners to speed up security could help. Schiphol recently reduced its slots on the basis that it couldn't find room to park all the planes. With such a tight squeeze on future airport development, it is essential that infrastructure is used efficiently. Why is it that Gatwick can actually go over or have handled 40 million passengers through a one-runway airport, right? And actually Amsterdam or Schiphol, it struggles actually with 60 million or a bit more than 60 million passengers and 6 runways, right? So we have similar challenges with air traffic control. The demise of the, as I said before already, the meaningful single European sky means many of the targets of more capacity in the air will be missed. There is a significant threat to airport capacity from governments mandating flight cuts on the ground and reducing noise. A global agreement, the balanced approach to noise management, which is enshrined in EU law, is in place to ensure that decisions about airport operations are made after full consideration of the economic implications as well as the needs of local residents. Under the balanced approach, a whole range of options must be considered, and operational restrictions can be imposed only as a last resort. Some politicians are trying to ignore the balanced approach, which the industry has robustly sought to defend. For instance, at Schiphol Airport, the government announced a reduction of slots in defiance of the balanced approach and was forced to back down. We are seeing a similar situation developing in Brussels, which you probably have heard already. My last point about capacity is the airport slot rules. We need to be clear here. The slot rules make the best use of capacity that exists. They cannot conjure up new capacity from thin air. Nevertheless, if there are obligations on all stakeholders, more can be done. For example, airport should declare and update their capacity in a timely manner to ensure that slot rules work effectively. Moreover, anything which undermines the successful global harmonization of the slot rules could actually make utilization of capacity less efficient. The European slot regulation is mostly aligned with the worldwide airport slot guidelines, which is vital to ensure the smooth running of global aviation network. Regulators should be very careful before undermining this essential foundation of the global aviation system. Our final competitiveness C is consumer issues. I'm going to focus on two today: EU 261 consumer protection rules and EES and ETIAS border management program. The EU 261 regulation is very badly drafted. It is a drag on connectivity and competitiveness that costs euro 5 billion per year in compensation in compensations only, and further 1 billion in legal and administrative costs. A proposed revision has been on the table since 2013. Its progress has been held up by political dispute that had nothing to do with passenger rights. The 2013 proposal has a number of key advantages: a clear definition of extraordinary circumstances, new threshold for delay compensation, standardized complaint procedures, harmonized enforcement, and cap on duty of care. Finally, it is important to note the regulation has not led to reduced delays for passengers due to the lack of shared accountability. You would think that given this enormous cost, disruption would have declined and on-time performance would have improved. In fact, the opposite has happened because so many delays in Europe are outside of the airline's control. The main cause of increased delays is due to air traffic control and the failure to progress with the single European sky project, yet the EU 261 doesn't have an impact on the ANSP, right? So take the example that we're all familiar with, the NATS disruption in August 2023. It cost the airlines £100 million, but it didn't cost NATS anything. Regarding EES, the industry is concerned there are critical unsolved items which will require urgent and coordinated action from both the EU member states prior to its implementation. Adequate time in between final decision and deployment, one of the key issues. Ensure a proper readiness by states at their border crossing points, right? Harmonized framework to the implementation of a transition period in which member states can use measures to alleviate the impact of EES at the border. There is a delay in communication campaign to the public and the lack of ongoing support by phone for carriers to assist travelers. The industry remains committed to collaborating with authorities for a successful implementation. On the ETIAS front, a growing number of unofficial and/or fake websites have been advertised, pretending to provide official information about the EU's upcoming travel requirements. We urge travelers to please refer exclusively to the official ETIAS website, which is europa.eu/ETIAS. The media can play actually an important role here in relaying this message to your readers. To conclude, Europe's economy is lacking dynamism and losing competitiveness. This is something which increasing number of European policymakers have begun to realize and are pledging to reverse. In general, Europe should stop trying to act unilaterally and focus on global standards, particularly in the areas of slots and environmental regulation. Europe is at its crossroads. Competitiveness can be restored by focusing on controlling costs, increasing capacity, and reforming consumer regulation. By reinvigorating air connectivity across within Europe and beyond, aviation can play a strong role in strengthening the economy of Europe as a whole. So thank you very much, and I look forward to questions.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Rafael. We've covered a lot of ground there, and other issues, of course, have emerged over the few days. And we're happy to take questions. Who would like to go first? Charlotte, go ahead. Thanks.
Good morning, thanks, Rafael. I wanted to ask about the attempts at consolidation we're currently seeing in Europe, and some of the challenges those are facing with the European Commission. What would you like to see happen there? And do you think we face greater barriers to consolidation in Europe?
Well, in the case of consolidation, we have not seen in the case of Europe, we have not seen any negative impact on consolidation in the market, right? We do believe in some as far as we know so far, it has actually probably increased the offer that is being serviced to the market. Price, we don't see any price increases above either inflation or the cost of fuel, right? So overall, we are not seeing or declining connectivity for that matter, right? So in general, we're not seeing a negative impact so far on consolidation, and so we cannot have a negative, let's say, probably more of a positive view on it, right? It probably will give more offers to the market overall.
Thank you. Yes. Yes.
Andreas. Sorry. Good morning. Andreas Schulz at BW. Rafael, well, we soon get a new EU government or election and so on. And back to EU 261, it's a real burning issue. Do we expect any progress or willingness within EU to discuss a reform on that? Because it's a long ongoing issue like SES and so on.
Well, we do expect, we're looking forward to the outcome of the election, right? When we talk about I mentioned in my presentation that we are, I think not us as an industry only, but we have read the news that everybody is concerned about, let's say, the competitiveness of Europe as an European industries, and I believe very much that we need to act on much quicker, right? On things that are homework's not done, right? I mentioned 2013, right? How is it possible that a regulation which has not improved connectivity, which has not improved actually the efficiency of how we manage our passengers in the region, has not been dealt with? I hope that with the new commission, the new members, with the wishes to improve European connectivity, European industrial competitiveness, this will be dealt with. And as I said before, I mean, there has to be accountability here, right? And it seems that this is not necessarily, I mean, the airlines are basically paying for inefficiencies in the whole system. I mentioned the example of the air traffic control delays and related, right? So I think we are hopeful and we're willing to work and collaborate with it, but it's already due time to make it happen, right? 2013 is a long time ago.
Thank you. Yes, Bruno.
Bruno Trevedic, Les Echos. Talking about the decline of the European air transport, have you any figures that would make an actual picture of what is the market share of the European airlines on international long-haul flights, for example? How is it going?
Yeah, exactly. Well, you are specific numbers that we could actually provide. I mean, you're talking about global market share in relation to long-haul flights, right? We can provide that data for sure to you. I mean, when I mention a decline, we obviously know that the European market is a mature market, right? And there are faster growing markets around the world. But it doesn't mean that we don't have to solve, right? the issues that we are having today that hinder that strategic connectivity that Europe needs to maintain. I guess that's your point to the long haul, right, which is what I would consider part of the lifeline of the European economy, right, because Europe is a global trading region. And we will get you the numbers, but we do believe that many of the things that I highlighted in terms of making sure that we are able to maintain and improve our connectivity. Those are the homeworks that we need to do to make it happen, right? So, but we don't have those specific numbers at hand, but we will get it to you.
Yeah, and I think the other point to make is the competitiveness of European airlines, the strength of the European airlines, that's within the control of regulators in the industry in Europe. And I know that there's sometimes they look elsewhere, they look outside and look at competition from other regions and argue that maybe it can be unfair. But there's definite things that can be done in Europe to strengthen aviation Europe. These are the points that Rafael was making. Thank you. Another question, please. Yes, Richard.
Schvartzman, Airline World. You mentioned single European sky. It's a topic raised at many airlines for Europe summits for years. Really was very critical about the outcome of the European Commission and Parliament. But what's next? Is it up to the new Commission and the new Parliament to push for it? Is it something IATA can do, or who is in charge now?
Well, the first part, as I said, I mean, the agree, or I guess agree single European sky will be put into, I think it will be formalized in the first quarter the last quarter of this year probably, right? And then at the beginning of next year, we'll have to work with those new rules, let's say, of modifications. It will not make any difference actually. But we will have to be working very closely with our local partners in every country, right? Because that's where we will have to find the efficiencies that are needed. I mean, so we will continue to work with the national governments. We will continue to work with authorities or the new, elected members of the European Commission, European Parliament. But obviously, if we don't have, first of all, in a situation where we're talking about a monopolistic service, right, and we don't have an independent regulator, right, and tough performance targets, right, it will be very difficult to improve to the levels that we need, right? So that's why we're saying we will continue to see the delays, we will continue to see the lack of efficiency that we need, right, to use the restricted capacity that we already have in Europe, right? Because we are restricted, we know that, but there are opportunities there. We keep saying this for such a long time that we could say if single European sky was implemented, we will be saving 10% of CO2. So with this in mind, and we know that, and we have failed to come with a stronger agreement on single European sky to move forward, as I said before, an independent regulator, right, that can monitor and actually drive performance, if you would, and tough performance targets that airlines also, if airlines do not perform accordingly, right, they will actually have marketing, they will be impacted by the market, right? Either you negative numbers, right, basically. And here, we don't see the same, let's say, incentives, if you would, to that sector, right? So I think it's a pity, but we will continue to work at national level to continue to find ways to improve and drive efficiency into the system.
Thank you. Yes.
Hi, good morning. Enrique Perella from Business Traveler. I have a question about ongoing trends, especially here in Europe, regarding air plus rail connectivity. I'd like to know what kind of influence you have and what your perception is on the future, because especially with politics, it's apparent that it's being imposed on some airlines to stop flying certain routes, for example, people to Brussels and Paris. So what is the future like, and what is the level of influence, in your opinion, from the IATA standpoint, on this potential new threat for the airlines to have, having to stop flying certain routes and give them to other operators that are not within their scope? Thank you.
Yeah, well, first of all, I think the threat is actually to impose something that is not necessarily achievable in every route that we're operating in Europe, right? So we have to be clear, not everything can be operated by rail, right? But here is not, we are not against actually the operation by railway is feasible. And you gave the example actually, right? The Brussels-Amsterdam case, right? There is a very good service there, and therefore, passengers can choose the best service option, right? So we are not against that idea where feasible, right? At the same time, the initiatives that we have seen in some other examples where certain domestic routes have been affected, it has very little impact in terms of actually reducing CO2. Okay, so that is something to be aware of. And the other is if as I said before, the connectivity of Europe cannot be replaced, right, by a rail network that, of course, will require, I don't know, billions or trillions to make it happen. It will not actually shorten or times, and it will obviously has had a very relevant environmental impact by constructions all along our countryside, right? So I don't think we have to be reasonable here, where we have to, as I said, you gave the example of Brussels, Amsterdam, and that is one route, I guess, that you have the choice, but we have to be able to give passengers the choice, and we have to use our infrastructure to the best way possible, existing infrastructure, right?
Yes, Harry.
Hi, good morning. Tony Kevena with Agence France Presse based in Paris. Talking about ADC, a deal was struck with, between the French government and the main ADC union in late April. The government says that it's going to improve operations, but French airlines are complaining that they were, first of all, left out of the loop and will eventually foot the bill. What's IATA's take on this topic, which has been a pain point for a very long time?
Well, I think one of the things that we see is a lot of pressure being put, I guess, in coming up to the Summer Olympics in France, right? So taking advantage of that to, I don't know, maybe get in some economic benefits, right? So we don't think that is the best way to act and the best way to go. We obviously, France is, I don't know, what do we call it, right? The strike capital of the world or something like that, because it's really, this is one of the most difficult areas in terms of dealing with this, the impact of this type of actions. I mean, we hope, I know everybody, we do support the right for strikes, but obviously on the right of workers, but I think here we need to find a balance, right, where we are not affecting, the overall system.
Any more questions? Yes, at the back. Thank you.
Hi Rafael, thank you. It's David Case here from Roots and ATW. You talked about the Dutch government's efforts to reduce capacity at Amsterdam last year. More recently, I think in May, we saw the infrastructure minister outline a revised package of measures which could include curfew potentially at night, but also limiting night flights. What is your take on the latest push to limit capacity?
Well, I think, I believe, first of all, for the example of the Netherlands or Amsterdam is a very emblematic one, because obviously the Netherlands is one of the most successful logistics centers in the world, right? I mean, so having taking these actions without actually consideration of the wider impact to the whole economy is one thing that I am puzzled a little bit, right? Because and then potentially not going through, as I said before already, on the balanced approach in the case of noise, not going through with maybe proper work with the industry itself, right, to come to the best solutions, because there are options here, right, to drive the efficiency that might be needed. And the other thing we need to bear in mind, I mean, they're for not just for Amsterdam, but in general. I mean, I think governments do need to be more careful in terms of the planning rules for the areas around the airport, right? Because at the end of the day, the airports are about to serve a whole country or a whole region, and therefore, I mean, the unilateral, let's say, decisions like this, we don't necessarily agree, because usually they don't have, or in this case, they don't necessarily have the proper consultation or work with the industry to find alternative solutions, right?
Yeah, and it's the same issue in Brussels as well. Proposals coming down the track maybe for Wi-Fi cuts, things like that. We're very clear, the balanced approach is what should be followed here. It has numerous mitigation options and operational restrictions of the last resort. So that's what needs to be followed. If it's followed correctly, as we've seen, it's happening in France. The balanced approach is official consultations that are underway in France. So we would expect the same process to be followed in Amsterdam and in Belgium. Thank you. Another question? Andreas again? Go ahead.
Rafael, how do you judge the current progress in collaboration between airlines and airports in order to foster the smooth passenger experience? And where do you see the gaps still to cover, the immediate burning points where it could be improved?
I think, I mean, in relation to the collaboration, I think we work very well with the airports in terms of the passenger experience. I think there are opportunities that we need to probably leverage more, which are related to digitalization, for example, right? Which is an area, again, we're restricted in infrastructure, and we can have a better use of digitalization to improve the passenger experience. We mentioned maybe investment in certain infrastructure areas, right, where we believe, if it's done at reasonable cost, obviously it's always, it's welcome in Europe, which is very difficult to access. I think there are opportunities there. I mentioned, again, efficiencies that could be driven. I mean, the example I gave before on Gatwick and Amsterdam in terms of driving efficiency through their infrastructure, right, is obviously there are opportunities there by building new stands or increasing capacity or increasing sizes of terminals, right? I think there are opportunities there. I wouldn't generalize also because we do have different cases in different airports. I mean, we think that the case of, as I said, just the example that we've been talking about, the Amsterdam case, I think it's a situation where it should have been consulted with the industry from the beginning, not only from the government side, but also from the airport side. And there are other cases where it's working well and the collaboration is working well. So I wouldn't generalize in that sense, but again, properly identifying the areas of infrastructure that need to be improved. Digitalization, as I said, the EU is having some interesting strategies of digitalization that we need to hopefully, it needs to be aligned with industry. And when I say industry, is airlines, airports, and everybody else in the value chain to be able to use that digitalization for the benefit of the customer. So, I mean, there are areas of improvement, but we do work with many airports in good ways, and obviously there are some cases where we could do better.
I think just to what Rafael was saying earlier about the EES issue, it's been reported, that there could be delays if that's not implemented properly, which is why we highlighted it in the presentation. If that's an area of investment that needs to be done, and it shouldn't be paid for by airlines. And the investment in border security is the responsibility of states. They need to be paying for this stuff, they need to be paying for the right people to be trained properly, and for the support to be in place. Because otherwise, and so this is not that I'm going to go to the airports here. It's the states need to be ready to make sure that the new system that they've imposed is going to launch smoothly. So obviously, we work closely with ACI and the airport community in Europe. We've made joint submissions to the Commission and other countries on the way to warn them that they need to be ready. So we have a very close working relationship with ACI on that issue in particular. Yes, good.
Eric read the newspaper this soir in Belgium. I'm also interested in the figure you could send to us about the way of seeing the decline of a European part. But I wonder, CO2 reduction, noise reduction, protection of consumer and inhabitants is the main things of the European strategy. So, is it a frontal opposition of European strategy about aviation IATA has, or is it more subjects of this? Because for European strategy, they think they are not declining, they are ahead of what has to be in the whole world. So that's what they think.
So the question is, if we are opposing are you saying that we are against the measures taken to reduce CO2 noise and
Of what is doing the strategy of Europe?
Yeah, but if the strategy of Europe, which we are committed as an industry, right, to achieve the net zero by 2050, right, in the case of CO2 emissions or the environment. So we as one example, in the case of CO2, as I mentioned, single European sky is one. So if there is commitment to achieve it, it is not shown, right, in that area at least. Right? So if we really want it, there is 10% potential reduction there. We've been talking for more than 20 years, and it's not there, right? That's one example. But if we want to achieve CO2 reduction, we have seen, I mentioned, increases in taxes in a few states with the if I can say, excuse of being related to it's an environmental tax, but the monies are not going into environmental related investments. So again, if we are aiming to achieve that by taxing aviation, for example, is actually taking resources away to the investments that are needed to bring that objective or dream, if you would, to reality, which we don't think it's a dream. We're all embracing it. That there is no question about it, and the industry is behind it. And again, the same thing for noise. I mean, if we want to do it, the balanced approach is already it's like an ICAO resolution, but it's enshrined in EU law. One, it is the best way to approach it before because it will give us all, after a proper evaluation, it will give us the best options to actually address the issue, and as a last resort, having to penalize, if you would, the connectivity, for example, of a community, right? Because there are new technologies, there are new procedures, there are different alternatives to handle that, but that's why we insist that the balanced approach should be followed, right? And then, if we talk about EU 261, as I said, there are merits in this 2013 initiative to reform EU 261 that has been ignored. I mean, again, we mentioned already I mean, a few times the example that the case of the NATS failure in, you know, in the UK, for example, right? I mean, it cost £100 million, but the airlines had to pay for something that it was not their doing, right? So again, here, that shows you that in a way, and it's the same here in Europe, if the cause of delays, the number one cause of delays are delays due to air traffic management, and actually the airlines are the ones that are paying for that, if there is some inefficiencies in the system that need to be addressed. We're not against having a proper regulation that will address that. That's and actually have the right accountabilities for any of these incidents, let's say, right?
Yes, I think the examples that Rafael was just giving you show that Europe might think, or certain European governments might claim to have a strategy that says we're going to grow and we support aviation. The facts don't back that up. You know, you look at Germany, 19% rise in its passenger tax. You look at Holland, the Netherlands, with reducing or trying to squash skip-on. You look at the UK with the issues they've got. You just go around Europe, they might say that they support aviation and want to see growth, but we don't see the policies that are supporting that, as Rafael just outlined. And you only have to come to a country like, you know, anywhere in the Gulf to see what's happened, or the other parts of the world who are investing in aviation. Latest technologies, new capacity, supporting their industry. So the evidence is not there to say that Europe is serious about expanding its aviation or making it more competitive. Any other questions? Oh, yes, brilliant.
There is a specific issue in Europe, which is a war in Ukraine, of course, and one of the consequences is the fact that European airlines can't fly over Russia anymore, which is a main competitive disadvantage regarding the Asian carriers and houses. Are there any action? What is the position of IATA about that?
Well, as you correctly said, I mean, the effect of, well, we highlighted that one of the risks that we face today in Europe in particular, but not exclusively, is obviously the geopolitical one, right? You highlighted one, which is obviously restricted the use of airspace in Europe and obviously from Europe to Asia, right? It is not ideal. Aviation is we say force for good. I mean, we you know, and if we are actually, I mean, we believe that connectivity is essential, and today obviously we understand the reasons why this is not happening. There is not something that we can do much about it, right? To be honest, and we hope that sooner than later some agreement will happen, because it does have an impact. When you mention that, again, I mentioned geopolitical, because there are, by now, if you look at the map of the world, we have so many areas that are restricted in airspace use because of war and conflicts, right? Which is actually undermining the global objective of achieving, you know, our environmental target, right? Because that means we have to fly longer hours, and obviously that doesn't necessarily help, right? And we have seen impact on the supply chain as well, right? So it does have an impact beyond just not being able to fly. Obviously, it has an impact on the cost of accessing competitive, you know, to maintain an efficient supply chain. So we are ready to work and support in any way possible, but obviously these are things beyond our control today.
Thank you. Any other questions? I've got one to close, actually, Rafael. Because I've seen in the papers there's been some reporting over this issue of cabin bag charges and issues around that, and what's going to happen with cabin bags, you'll be seeing this issue in Spain, and I wonder if some of our colleagues in the league would be interested in your view on that story.
Well, it's, yeah, you've probably heard the stories about the case in Spain. Obviously, still in an administrative procedure, but the news, I think, went already as a done deal, right? But that's one. The other is obviously the vast majority of travelers are actually not necessarily, having issues with their baggage, right? So in general, this is not, it is not something it is obviously. I'm not saying it's not a challenge and an issue in many cases. On the other side, it is important to understand that the unbundling of products, right? The option to choose exactly what you would like to have on board, right? Be it the carry-on luggage, be it a specific seat, be it internet service or anything else. It does give the passengers to be able to choose the adequate level of service they would like to have. And it does have also a very important component, which is it has developed, it is the backbone of the low-cost industry, which actually gave access, it gives access to a great number of customers, of citizens that because of that possibility and accessing, let's say, the specific service at lower cost, are able to travel. So we don't believe that, trying to put a regulation that will control and limit the offer will be beneficial to these travelers, will be beneficial to the connectivity of the region, and will actually potentially, will have a potential increase in prices. I mean, you have to remember that the average, margin of a ticket in Europe is a bit less than €7, right? So if you're starting to, obliged to have to include everything in by Monday on one service, then it means that obviously the cost will have to be passed to customers, right? So again, in this area, there are obviously opportunities that we are working informally with the Commission and A4E and other members of the industry in what is the best way to let's say standardize or frame, let's say, what is the right size, what is the right conditions, but not restricting the availability of you being able to select the right service that you would like to have. Because if you have to travel and you don't need to carry anything on or just basically a small bag, why would you pay extra? As I said, it gives accessibility, it gives freedom of choice, it gives, we don't believe in price controls or price restrictions. So again, we hope that this will not progress, I would say, right? In the contrary, that we will progress in something that will be more beneficial for the customers, right?
And I might say that in the case of Spain, the Spanish proposal, European law, we believe, supersedes that particular Spanish.
Yeah, that is an important point. Actually, obviously, there is already a European law that supersedes any local initiative like this, and that's why I mentioned at the beginning it was still in an administrative procedure. A bit coming too quickly to the conclusion that this was something a done deal, and it has to be taken with care, because again, as I said, there are very good things about, many good things about, obviously, many of the measures that we have taken in the EU to have standardized laws and procedures that allow us to have a very efficient and connected market, which provides, I do strongly believe in the quality of the connectivity and service that the EU has been able to build thanks to all of this. So we shouldn't try to fragment it in a way that actually can damage the connectivity and the service to the consumer, right, to the customer.
Thank you very much, Rafael. Thank you all for coming. You know where to find me or any of the comms team if we can help you with anything else. I hope you've enjoyed this AGM. Cheers. Bye.
Thank you very much.